Well, this next guest, Richard Grove, is a special guest for me. He's such a good friend, as is his wife, Lisa, and his little baby, Lucas. And they're just amazing people. Rich, I originally met him when he interviewed me at PorkFest, and it was such a good interview. He's brilliant. He's a forensic historian. I learn something new every time I talk to Rich. He has a great website called tragedyandhope.com. And he's just a really accomplished scholar. And so I'm really glad to have you here, Rich.
Hey, Lynn, thanks for inviting me. You guys have done such a great job all day. I've watched it since 2 o'clock Eastern time. Terry, in front of the camera, Brian Sovereign behind the scenes coordinating stuff. Jim Babb giving me the faulty information on his screen capture at the bottom of the screen. I posted that number. I was like, yeah, $9,000. So, hey, everybody, that wasn't me that was giving Jim that number. I was reporting what he put out. But this is amazing.
I really didn't know. Else, so it's fine.
I really didn't know that you guys could pull this off when Lynn was here a couple weeks ago, and it was still a lot up in the air. And I think, Jim, we talked maybe a month ago when Lynn and I were pressing some cider, and we were trying to figure out where she was going to be actually physically with the microphones and the webcams. And I'm just really happy to see that everything has come together. So, and the guests have been outstanding. Amazing. I didn't really expect an epic poem out of Kokesh, but I'm very impressed.
That's pretty amazing.
After that, really good.
Yeah, that's a hard show to follow. That's like the Who coming on after Jimi Hendrix burned his guitar, man.
Yeah, it is. That's pretty deep.
And then, I was really pleased to see the graphic behind you guys. My graphic designer, Greg Hardesty, had done the new Free Ross artwork, and I just wanted to point out to everybody that those chains are made up of ones and zeros. So that's kind of like our metaphor for the digitality of his crimes, because what Ross was trying to do was use the internet and create a free market. And most people aren't aware that we don't have a free market, but what Ross was trying to do through his education was make a free market like an eBay or Amazon without the government or without coercion or without all these other rules and regulations that none of us agreed to involved. And had he gotten a full education in high school or in college about how the world really works, maybe he would have done some things differently. But I think he had the best intentions, and I think it wasn't done because he's a evil criminal or a drug dealer or any of these things. I think he was an idealist, and I think, I heard this earlier that, you guys pointed out that Catherine Forrest in her decision, she was the judge in the trial, said that was the most dangerous part. I think that they really wanted to set a precedent with Ross's case because they specifically felt that his libertarian values were a threat to the way that the country is ruled and governed, and it's a threat to the monopoly of government. And there's it's a joke, but it's not really funny. What's the difference between the government and the mafia? And the punchline is the mafia doesn't have a 12-year indoctrination program to convince you that they're not the mafia.
Ooh.
And I think that's I think that's what Ross ran into. He's educated in a system that was very government friendly, and therefore it's like a fish being in water. You don't really see this aspect of it. I've got this Stop Wars Home Educate poster that Ernie Hancock had made, and that's what people are trying to figure out. They're like, what do you mean Home Educate, Stop Wars? Like, well, it's the government schooling that indoctrinates people to use force, fraud, coercion, all these different things that are very anti-libertarian in order to meet the economic agenda of you can call it the agenda of the new world, but really it's corporatism. It's the merger of corporations and our government system. And government, if it ever had a specific legitimate purpose, would be to secure our rights, not necessarily to keep us safe, but to secure our rights. And I think everything that's been going on in the past several years is really indicative of the government's actions to be antithetical to that. I think Ross's case is specifically a specific example of how that can go seriously wrong and injure an individual who's had his freedom taken away. And if you don't think that, there's a lot of people that say, well, freedom doesn't matter. I say, well, if it doesn't matter, then why is that the first thing they want to take away when they want to punish you?
That's interesting. That's right.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. So what do we do to increase our freedom given the state of the government, given that they don't like someone encroaching on their turf and they see liberty as a threat? How should we then live?
Well, Terry, that's a really good question. If I had kind of Koch brothers money, if I had billions of dollars, first thing I'd do is buy some politicians and get Ross out of prison. But since I don't think most of us don't have that, I took a step back. When first off, let me just backtrack. I didn't ever use the Silk Road. I didn't really know who Ross was before he was in prison. Certainly didn't get to talk to him on the phone or any of the things that I've done since he's been in prison because I wasn't familiar with his business. It was only because he went to prison and that Lynn made it to PorcFest and all these things, trickled down that it came onto my radar. And so I was kind of late to the game learning about all this. But what I did learn was, as a person who doesn't have a lot of money, we all sit here and we feel like we're victims as well. There's something we want to do. There's some progress we want to make. And if we had a bunch of money, we could just do that. But what do we do in the absence of all that? Well, in my case, I said, I have a friend who's a brilliant designer. Let me have him come up with some artwork.
Yeah,
I
really
know how to
great,
use,
too.
I know how to use a camera. So I film interviews with Lynn, and I try to use that to get information out to the public to get more people to buy into it, to free Ross.
You made those
Davi Barker-
T-shirts.
Yeah, Davi Barker and Drew made the pins out of the Free
beautiful
Ross
pins.
artwork. I've got one of the prototypes of the new Free Ross shirt. So these are just little things we can do. I mean, I've been tweeting all day. I mean, it didn't cost me a dime to sit and put this telethon in front of more people that are in my audience. And I've got people that listen to my work in 186 countries. So while it's not thousands of people in all those countries yet, I just feel like that we all have to do whatever we can, even though we are kind of have the absence of resources that these multi-billion-dollar corporations throw away every day on trivial matters. We're dealing with something, and it's not necessarily about Ross's specific case, because a lot of people are like, well, why are you interested in some guy who's in prison? I'm interested because the reasons that they put him in prison could happen, that the same thing could happen to any of us. Mm-hmm. The precedent's set with the ways that they put him in prison, like transferred intent, like I'm responsible all of a sudden for somebody else's actions. Okay. That's pretty dangerous. That could happen to any of us. Parallel construction, where the NSA surveillance that's illegal, that's being used on American citizens, can be used to construct a case against you, and then they can come out and just make up like a paper trail and say, oh, here it is. We can put you in a cage for your life, for double your life plus 40 years, for double your life plus 40 years plus $180 million. So if we just let these things go unchecked, what kind of world are we going to be living in 20 years? And Ross will still be in a cage, and I don't think that's healthy for any of us. So this is off everybody's radar. I mean, there's a lot of people that are tuning into this webinar live, but I hope that we reach 10 or 100 times more than that once it's recorded, past today, because this is the power of the internet. We're not just reaching people like in the past. If it was live radio broadcast or live television broadcast, when it's done, it's done. Today, we're just making like the base media to go out and do the job. This is a day of marketing about freedom and liberty and libertarian values, because that's at the core of why Ross took the actions he did.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And you're someone also, Rich, who is so committed that you've just committed your life to this. You're not just talking. He has committed his life to this. So, well, I mean, you have the ability to make a whole lot more money, and but you do this instead, and I really respect that.
Well, I was in corporate world, and I became a whistleblower in 2003. I went and represented myself in court because I couldn't find a competent attorney that would go up against these multi-billion-dollar companies that I was blowing the whistle on. And I learned the hard way that American journalism isn't about actually delivering truth to its readers or its viewers. It's about serving the corporate fascism that's out there. And what could I do? Could I sit around and complain about it? Sure, I could. But could I learn to outgrow that status quo and learn to educate myself and share what I learned with my audience and learn how to use all this different technology that's available to individuals at a much lower cost than corporations pay for it? It's like, for me to put on a program, it doesn't cost $100 million, or for me to make a movie, it doesn't cost $100 million. I can do it because of the democratization of technology that's available. And this is a unique opportunity. And I don't know how long all this technology is going to be available to us, or they're going to let us broadcast openly like this without some government censor sitting in the middle and pushing a button every few seconds. So I just felt like, I could go and make money, which is a bunch of pieces of paper with funny symbols printed on it. And I could basically sell my soul for that and give it, that's giving away your time, your consciousness, your attention, your energy to do something that has no value. Or I could pursue truth wherever it leads me. And that's what I've been doing for the past 12 years. And true, it's not lucrative like my corporate job was, but my corporate job was never nearly as fulfilling as anything I do in a given day.
Right.
So there is a trade-off. So I did it voluntarily, but I wish it would have been different. I wish the world would have worked the way it was advertised to me. Instead, you find that it's much more complicated. It has a lot more nuance. There's a lot more to consider. but now you're learning to think for yourself, and that's the opposite of schooling. That's truly education. What we get in this country is propaganda, and if it was really truth, they would call it truth, and if it was really education, it would be, you know, not propaganda. They're filling us and our kids and the future generations with false ideas. I mean, they've thrown around the term fake news a lot in the past couple of weeks. They've been purveying fake news for decades.
Yes.
We are part of the solution about
They're champions
that.
of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think it's, you know, there's a lot of learning to go around for everybody. We all have competencies in certain areas. We all find that we are incompetent in other areas. But I think the key is that we can learn to recognize our incompetence, learn how to backfill that with self-education, and learn how to depend on each other for our strengths. It's like you can depend on me to be a good guest today, but you couldn't depend on me to wire my studio to do all the things you guys are doing down there in Media, Pennsylvania. And that's why I said, Lynn, it's a longer drive for you, but those guys are wired with the webcams. My studio is all DSLRs, and I think we made the right decision because it looks great and sounds great down there.
Yeah. But your support and brilliance really has been amazing and wonderful, and Lisa's support as well. And, you know, I have nothing but respect and admiration for you.
You can lay down all those compliments, Lynn, but I'm not picking them up because, if anything, I've done what I've done in relation to this case because I was inspired to see Ross's mom out there talking to a group of people at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. And, you know, my first year going there was 2014. I think that was your first year there. I kind of heard a little bit about Ross's case there. I didn't see your presentation. And then by the time I went in 2015, I knew who you were, who Ross was, what his case was, had downloaded his case documents, had read the articles, and said, this is somebody who I have to film this week so I can bring this message to other people. And then we had a great time this past summer. And we've gotten the word out to many, many thousands more people than had heard about it before. So while it all doesn't happen in one day, it's actions like those we're taking today that kind of trickle down and can amount to a serious success down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to see you're being successful so far today, even if it's not as much as Jim reported earlier.
But we're optimists over here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rich, we appreciate you being with us. Thank you for what you're doing, how you're helping people in a practical, very pragmatic way, and showing the cause of liberty still is alive. And it's a great way to live. I love what you said about educating ourselves. Going out there, learning, that's what it's all about. You're doing that, sir. We appreciate it. Thanks for being with us. How does someone get in touch with you if they say, hey, I want to know more about this guy, Rich, find out what he's got going on?
Thanks, Terry. My website is tragedyandhope.com. It's named after a 1960s history book that everybody should read, but it's probably too big. So you can catch this book, Tragedy and Hope 101. This is a good summary of what my site's all about, even though it's not written by me. And on Twitter, that's the only social media I use. My handle is @TragedyAndHope.
At Tragedy and Hope. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Rich. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much, and I can't wait to be a viewer for the rest.